Hey everyone, I am posting there first time ever. If you have some advice, I need it. 3 days ago, I turned 15. Well, my grandma gave me the best present ever. Under some circumstances, she could relieve me of my apartment, at which point it would no longer belong to strict dad, and we all know who in the end that pussy-whipped sucker is. But instead, she made her penthouse out and out mine. Apartment from a couple of years ago where my grandma does not live. She lives in the suburbs, but takes advantage to stay here sometimes if you want space near the city. I was so happy, because to be honest, this last year and a half has been pretty shitty for me. My dad was the first to walk out on us. He was always somewhat of a workaholic, and almost never had the time for me or my mom. Even still, this came as some sort of surprise. Although my dad left the house quietly nearly a year ago, and it wasn't until then that Mother even told me. They had apparently already filed for divorce when they told me about it. My parents were getting a divorce, and Dad was too stressed to live with us anymore. I had no idea what exactly was overwhelming him. He couldn't even say goodbye to me face to face. He told me to be good, then he moved out. That was it. I never saw him again, and my parents split up shortly after that. At the time, my state did not have a long waiting period, so my mom got to keep the house, and we got full custody terms for me and brother. My dad has visitation, but he just hasn't come around yet. Shrugs. I thought that was bad enough. However, about 2 months or so ago, my mom told me she had been dating this guy. Let's just call him John. For almost 3 months. They were lovebirds, and she did not want to kill any time since it was passing by. After all, though they had just got engaged. I had little time to deal with my mother's new love interest. She informed me that she was, and this guy, he would be my stepdad. I mean, we all wanted to be happy too, but I wasn't having it, because 5 months does not simply pass like that, and suddenly, your fiancé better real quick. But she was like, don't worry about it. 2 weeks later, she introduced me to him, and he was so standoffish with me. But with my brother, he acted completely different, and was playful as well. And then, well, my brother was 4, so the fact that I remember them being more playful made a lot of sense. A few weeks later, though, my mom shared something with me that totally altered how I saw them both. Therefore, 2 weeks ago, my mom told me to sit down with her, and she said that the only reason why it had been such a fast engagement was because he got offered an amazing job, and is taking it. Other than that, they would have to leave and live in a different state. They were going to leave me here with my grandmother anyway, because she had all those strings attached. I wouldn't want Tom Corey to everything them. But I can recall saying to her, if that meant staying with my mom, instead of moving away. So be it, because Dad already walked out on me once. I didn't want that for my mother either. But she tried to make me think it was a terrible idea, because my school was here. All of my friends were in this area, and I had been happy again. I, however, insisted on going with her. Eventually, she just spit it out. She wanted me to stay, because she said that John only wanted my brother to go with them then, because he was still young, and they could build a relationship. I, however, was rather old, and could never really be his daughter. It seems he downloaded the fact that I had dared tell my mother 5 months was too soon to be engaged, considering nobody knew him from Adam. He was convinced that I would never get over the fact my mother and father were no longer together, and would not accept him, which is what my own mother thought too. That was why she had told me to return and find it for myself. It was devastating for me to hear this, because I expected nobody else, at least my mother, would be with me, and she left just like that, once John asked her. It was not that I mind living with my grandma. She is a lovely woman, and I really like her, but I love me mum as well. So naturally I was devastated, and we started to argue, which is not what this life needs. I said that I did not want to wait for them to move away. On that day, I had packed my bags and was to leave for Grandma's. Certainly, it was not possible at that moment to set up the move, but in a matter of days, I had myself packed and ready for moving out. My mom tried to tell me it was not that, and she still loved me, but really only looking out for herself because she did love me, just wanted a taste of happiness. Those last days at home, I didn't say a word to my mother, not even goodbye the day that I left. Honestly, I didn't even think it was worth saying goodbye to anyone but my little brother, whom I'd miss for sure. Anyways, I moved in with my grandma after that, and she was so sympathetic. For the record, my grandma is actually my mom's mom. The second set of my grandparents are entirely different. They do not know me, and there is an established reason for that. Namely, as a published author, the going rate to get into heaven with this crew would be about $500,000. I believe similar fees paid early on in life kept them fairly distant from their other son also. So far, she has been very nice and caring. I believe that life was relatively simple with her. As a result of it, felt like she actually liked me too. Plus, you know the way elders might be when confronted head-on by one other elder, Rain, who they imagine is performing horribly. Everything is pretty great in here, except the time I need to get there and back from school. I talk to my brother, and I call home every night just so he can say hi. Otherwise, we don't even talk to each other. 4 days back. I celebrated my birthday at home. I mean, who throws a party? Oh, that's right, my grandma. She even started adding a few of my school besties, stalking me on Facebook too, and some relatives. And I was shocked to almost lift my spirits after feeling so low since being dropped off by Diane. But then we cut the cake, and my grandmother told me her gift, and that was to be a pleasant surprise. Older sister then said her lawyer is going to act as trustee for the property until I turn 18, at which point it's all mine. It was the best news I had heard in forever, and there was no way that my mother needed to know it. But yesterday, I found out she was told about the gift from my grandmother by someone who had been at the party. Whoever it was, and at this point, I could care less. But the person had called her up last night to tell her that she knew about my grandma's gift. They figured out he wanted to adopt me, since after my conversation with John, thus far away from the police station. As long as I got grandmother to sign over ownership of that property. I do not know why, but she actually thought I may be happy for this news. As now, at last offspring was in the area, and I could finally go along. This made me very uncomfortable, and I told her simply that no, none of this was going to be happening, and she needed not call back again. I then ended the call, but she rang me back a few minutes later. This time, I didn't answer. Then, she texted me this message. Look, I'm really sorry if your feelings got hurt that I was trying to join a cult in which we play by John's rules and live life on his terms. But what you need to realize is, after me and your dad split up, he turned more awesome than ever before. I mean, of course I had my family, but that's a whole another thing. He comforted and also financially helped me. I have never allowed you to feel it, or even spoken into existence, because I don't want these thoughts in your mind for 1 second, and defiantly not from me. But he is any 9T the most giving person. I get a crap of child support from him, and the settlement alimony I'm getting separately. No income whatsoever. It's less than $20K a year. Oh, don't even let me go there. I know you actually forgot your dad was the main income earner of our family, right? Of course, I am fortunate he left me the house otherwise. Without his support, anything would have priced in rents. You know, our standard of living was always very expensive. When your father and I were married, I never had to worry about money, but after he left, everything changed. Nothing was like it used to be, back in those days when we still lived together as a family. Although I picked up extra shifts at work, there was no way I could bring home his income. John was the person who I gravitated to when John started dating me. He took the lead. I know he has not really acted like it towards you, but that is probably because of his previous relationships, where children turned into a sore point before everything fell through. Now, we have to consider his trauma. I also was aware that my mom would take good care of you, so I felt secure in the hands I was leaving you, if nothing else. I mean, I never left you. You were staying with your gran, and you know for sure that she would never have allowed feelings of abandonment to creep in. I only wish you thought about my pleasure. Well, now that I set it up so you could join us, just come over and do whatever John thinks he wants from you to do your part for the both of us. Almost. You are sorely missed by even your brother. I realize you mad, but I like that, and I know you love me. So reply soon. I love you. That message did cause me to pause, but that last part really pissed me off. Because she wanted to do everything that John had her doing, so I was going to have do the same. It was stupid, privileged, and pathetic in my view. I would have been surprised if my mother had seemed like an independent person anymore. So, as nice as that message felt at first, it later just nauseated me. I replied half an hour later, saying that I wasn't doing anything John wanted me to, because she and him could go live happily ever after, like they planned, while leaving away from the country alongside my grandma. And frankly, I was done talking to her, because all she had shown me since then was very disappointing behavior from an adult like this. And when I talked about it with Grandma, she replied, "Well, no matter what, as of right now, Bob is not getting the property because she doesn't know him and trust him as far as own a piece of property elsewhere. She was confident that he would merely use it as a kind of selling point, nothing more than bait to lure me in so I can get some money from you. It is also for a good. That way, I did not accept my mom offer." But she was not going to take no for an answer. This morning, she turned up at my grandparents' house with my brother. Fortunately, I was in school when she stopped by. My grandmother did not waste any time in telling me why it was my mother had to come visit so urgently as I came into her living room. Granny said she came to see me personally, and that this was the proposal from last night I had dismissed. So I told her that it was nothing other than ignoring anything at all. Of course, I replied to my mother and told her exactly what was on my mind. She could replay the message if she liked. I told her to stick with what we had agreed on, because there is no way in hell that I am going to be able to talk my grandmother into putting this property in anything other than John's fucking name. We never trusted him. I had made that crystal clear in the diary. So, I did not understand why she was still perplexed. I was too brief and sounded scathing, but what had not? So anyway, my wretched mother started crying, repeating herself over and over about how she just wanted to make us all happy. But however hard she tried, it always turned out wrong. I was so angry she was out here in the half-living room crying, when it should be me, goddammit, because I really hate how my parents have treated me like shit, if anything. I swear to God, my dumbass told her stop, and you got it twisted. That it's okay for a woman to slut around, disrespect men, as long as that lands them their goal of the day. Making themselves happy, expecting everyone else, should bend over somehow, just so they can be. Perhaps everyone else was prepared to carry out that request, but I surely wasn't. I had a future, and I was not going to throw it away chasing after her, just because she likely needed someone else with more coddling. She was taken aback by that, and she left soon after. She never replied. I found out a little later that she had blocked me, and now it caught up to me. What kind of an ass thing was about saying all those words? Therefore, I come here and ask, am I the asshole for telling my mom that she was selfish and only wants to be happy? Update 1. Hi everyone, so I wanted to start with saying thank yous. Everyone who commented on my original post, it was a real way of railing me back in and gearing up for action again. It really made me wake up, and yeah, I suppose there are many points that never even crossed my mind. Everything made more sense to me. I didn't even realize my mother had been messing around with him from prior the divorce. Maybe she is confident to tell us now, because it serves her purposes, and getting a cool divorce or whatever problems are out of the way, and therefore we will never know. To be honest, the only reason I hadn't thought of it yet was that no matter what my mother had done or said before this point, she couldn't cheat. But at the moment, I truly do not. No. She could be, for all I know. But that's not my problem anymore. Now she has made it very clear to me she wants nothing from them. The only thing it's bothering me is I cannot speak to my brother no more, and I miss him. He and I had always got along famously. Let's face it. He might be John's kid, as many of you have suggested. I am trying not to think this way, but if people talk about that is really hard for me. I want to know the truth, but I am scared. Over the last couple of days since I sat down on such post and spoke to my grandmother, we have discussed these prospects at length between ourselves, but are yet unable to seek an answer, so that it makes sense for us all to feel this way about my mother. I kind of want to ask my dad, but I even wonder if he would talk about this with us. It has been 4 days since my mother visited us, and we have not heard from her till now. The first day, my mother had blocked me. Then later that day, my grandmother told me she had blocked her too. That is kind of an ungrateful thing to say, though, my grandmother. She has been raising me, even after telling my mother that she does not want any child support because of the fact that money is one thing that her family, my grandmother, never had a problem with. This woman is caring for me out of the pure kindness and love she has for just a boy. My grandma definitely won't be the one to give up her retirement time of leisure, but I'm also pretty sure my mom can at least express a little gratitude for that. Unfortunately, though, she's blocked her instead. It's just a lot of things that I'm angry with my mom about, and lost questions for which I have no answers. I hope it all comes out eventually. Update 2. Hey everyone, this is going to be a somewhat long post as today. During the evening, my father stopped by for a visit. My grandma had gotten a hold of him, but didn't tell me at all in case he wasn't able to make it, and she did not want me getting my hopes up. At any rate, he did show as soon as the news was out that my mother and John were engaged. I need time to process so many revelations, but will try, and was asked, to write them here. It really took me by surprise to see him, but I was more taken aback when he hugged me and said that it is so sorry about everything. He pulled me down to sit, and he began telling my grandmother and I everything that he knew. Would tell me that he and my mother had fallen out of love many years ago, but they stayed together all this time because they wanted to keep something in the family, not seeing their favorite child prancing around with issues coming from a broken home. 3 years after that, my dad began sleeping with one of his employees. He desperately wanted to tell my mother, but never found the nerve. She found out about it herself in the WPP, spoiler, around a year ago, when she filed for divorce last spring. She would keep her part of the bargain as long as he kept his distance from us, she had advised him. She laid down a list of requirements. He would be giving her the house to keep in its entirety. She will raise us alone, if there was any doubt, and no matters his visitation rights were stated by him. Then it had been determined upon when or which they'd occur after that, because we wouldn't see with our dad again until Mom says so. Which she demanded to the point that it really was an exorbitant sum possible for settlement alimony and child support, he also agreed to all of. He only asked for one thing in exchange, that she shut her mouth and never say anything to me about his affair, because he did not want me hating him, thinking of him as cheater. She had kept her end of the bargain so far, but at a price, with her and I. He also apologized to me for always being a workaholic, and never spending enough time bonding with me. Though in his defense, the person who always wanted more, and Fiancé, was my mother, which is why she forced him to work day after day, because honestly living up to give her what kind of lifestyle that want would come with a hefty price if he wasn't slogging night and day. He said there was no excuse, but he also did say it was not 100% his fault. I can see that, but I also have a hard time accepting that truth. He told me that he had come to see me without calling my mother, because the message from grandmother said, "Would John know my dad?" And we realized why he hurried over is because apparently not only did this guy know who John was, but has also known exactly what kind of person and came to us as a warning about him. As it turned out, my mother, father, and John had been part of the same group in college. My parents were a couple, but John had always harbored feelings for my mother. The night before commencement, they'd beaten the bars, and John had declared his love to my mother. My mom was with my dad at the time, so obviously she shut him down, but didn't let my father in on any of this for about 2 weeks. She then said that she was not clear on what her feelings are, so they stopped seeing each other. My dad said they had been broken up for almost 2 months at this point, and during that time, he was hearing from some friends of his who mentioned she went on a date with John, but it did not go well. So in the end, she came back to him. They made up, and then my dad dared to tell her not to go near John, because that would be bad for their relationship, so she couldn't speak with him and tried, but it didn't last long. But then later that year, he discovered she had not completely cut him off, and they got in a huge fight, with which nearly broke them up. But that bridge fell apart when John came to visit my dad back at his apartment after the aforementioned fight, and then got into a fist fight with him afterwards, because he believed it was going to impress my mother. After all, she had told him several times until he suddenly turned violent, so what did the asshole have to be mad about? And cut him off eventually. My dad explained to me at age 4, 24 years ago, that John was just plain crazy and had never been a good person. He went away after college when my mother cut him off, and he never received a phone call for years. Now he, however, is convinced my mother and John must have picked it back up a few years ago after she made the offhand comment about hearing from some friends that they ran into him in town. He didn't know when my mother actually began speaking to John again, and if they were engaged, then she did cheat on him as well, which meant all those stipulations that he told me had been in place just blew up. I need to go talk with her. My dad said that he will deal directly and confront my mom, but I want to hear from her first. Therefore, he has assured me that I am going to talk my mother and listen her everything after it, for all the while, whatever he wants. It's still sinking in, but it's so complicated for me. Really. I don't know who to believe. My parents haven't been good to me. My life is just so messed up. Update 3. So I asked her about Dad and not my meeting with him. I just wanted to have a private conversation with her and hear it from the horse's mouth. To avoid me, she had blocked my number, so I decided to just show up unannounced. My dad came to visit 3 days ago, and I talked to my mother yesterday for the first time. I came to the door, and she seemed surprised, but at least let me in. Since John was not home, I felt comfortable and could speak openly to her. I first said I was sorry to her, but it was really my way of earning an open line with this woman. I prevaricated for some time, emphasizing how I was just having a lot of trouble welcoming John into our fold so shortly, and that's what the root cause had been. Then, I got down to business. I kind of suggested that I had been for some time, but it did not make sense to me how my mom could have met someone as great as John so soon after the divorce. It seemed to me that this was too coincidental. It was a brilliant opening to admit that John had been at her college, but she never said it. All she said was that he had been a really lucky break for her, and ended it at that. My dad told me they have been friends since college, and he had pictures to prove it, so I believed him. The only one I questioned was the veracity of his story regarding the threesome, but as soon as my mother claimed to never know him earlier, so then few minutes later she said, "I liked when we had that shower together last month," and sassed off, leaving me puzzled. In whose lies do you trust? Only then did my mother make it more difficult for herself by informing me that she had never meant to inform me of this. However, the reason behind her hasty engagement with John and willingness to leave town with him was because she really wanted to just erase all existence of Dad from hers. Again, and this time she informed him of his extradietic activities, the one thing that made her force my father to give up everything for me and swear on a deathbed never to tell. Well, after that, I saw no purpose for me to be sitting there and communicating with her. I just told her good night and left. The moment I stepped out, the first thing I called my father and said he was free to do whatever you want, as now that for me it is clear that there are no lie speak a words which daddy so firm. Thus my mother is about to be nailed back by karma. Not to say my dad is off the hook, but hey, he's not as bad as mother. Update 4. Hey everyone, I have a lot of things to spill. To start with, everybody wondered whether my brother was really dad's son, and frankly I did too. In December, however, they took a paternity test after my father confronted her, and it came back that he was indeed the father. They ruled that my dad would get full custody, and because I'm 15, all they have to do is ask me who I want to have the full, and pretty much by law I can say him. He'll for sure get it. But I'm still also with my grandma, because even though cliché, yes, a dad is always trying to fix things, and there are a lot of issues that we have yet work on. Katrapik man, malamangan. Pero ang importante, kami lang nilita. Tapos dun muna ko komportable na babae sa mundo. She was fucking furious when she learned that my visit to her had only been a bullshit ruse for me to ferret out the truth about her and John. She unblocked me that other time to cuss me out, and blocked back afterwards. Neither of us have spoke since then. John, on the other hand, dropped my mom as quickly as he had married her when they learned that Dad was contesting reducing both alimony and child support. It turns out that all of his job offer talk was one fat lie he told my mom. And he was going to take all of Mom's money, and he drifted along into that business with his uncle. Things weren't even going well anyway, but now, my mother, went. The fact he was doing so only to get my mother pressure me into changing the name on a girded property, from grandmother, for some absurd reason, obviously. They had dated for 2 years, and he'd played her all along. Anyway, what happened is that my mother got screwed, and she has had no embarrassment in telling everyone how it was John who screwed her over. She doesn't know that her friends talk about her. When they did, my dad heard, and then I found out. I just thank my lucky stars that the day John said, "It is the day Mom decided she never ever wanted to speak to me again, because stuck in a room with her would be hell." Anyways, my dad and I have agreed to work on our relationship. Me. He promised me out of his own mouth that he'd do better by being a daddy. Once he gets even full or joint custody of my brother, we are going to try and be a happy, functional family. Not sure about the functional one, but